The Permanent Secretary, the Director for Housing, invited guests, the financial institutions, ladies and gentlemen. I intend to be very, very short. Please excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. But as you would be aware that the Bainimarama government has put in a lot of effort in terms of providing affordable and accessible housing to as many Fijians as possible. Housing, of course, is a major issue, not just in Fiji, but of course in many parts of the world. But we, of course, are interested in what is happening in Fiji. I think one of the issues that does affect housing is that we need to play a massive catch-up game. This morning, I was earlier on today, I was with a group of predominantly women, and many of them were working in garment factories, and most of them actually lived in squatter areas. So housing is not just necessarily about a house per se, but it's also about accessibility to land. And it's not just accessibility to land, accessibility to affordable land, but also land that is secure. Many times, for example, in the past few weeks, when we've been out in the public, and of course we've known this for a period of time, is that people say, look, I want to access my FNPF funds so I can build a better house. But FNPF won't let me withdraw the funds. The reason why FNPF won't let them withdraw the funds is because the land on which they want to build the house is not actually theirs. Or they don't actually have a proper lease on it. It's Vakavanua arrangements. Or they are squatters. So in terms of their accessibility to funding, it becomes limited. So one of the reasons that we have provided this housing grant this year, as announced by the Honourable Prime Minister, and you have the financial institutions here, is we want to include the financial institutions as part and parcel of the strategy to address the issue of home ownership. Home ownership is very, very critical because home ownership, and many of you may not necessarily realize this, will stop people from going to money lenders. I'll tell you a very short story. A couple of years ago, I was approached by one of the CEOs of one of the banks who came and showed me a footage of ATM machines in his bank around about 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning on a Thursday or Friday morning. That's when the pay goes into the ATM accounts or to the people's personal banking accounts. And the footage actually shows a group of people, or 2 or 3 people actually, getting off a car, pulling out about this many ATM cards or FPOS cards with a book with all the PIN numbers. And these are all money lenders. These money lenders actually, when they lend people money, they actually take the ATM cards from them and they take the PIN numbers from them. And then every week they go and withdraw the funds from their accounts. Technically the bank, of course, can stop those accounts from operating because they're actually breached. And one of the key requirements, which is when you get an ATM machine, you're not supposed to disclose your PIN number to anybody. But of course they don't do that because they realize it's actually become a fact of life in Fiji. What we need to do is reverse that fact of life. And one of the fundamental reasons why people go to money lenders is because those money lenders don't take collateral. In other words, the people who are borrowing money from them, they don't have anything to give as security. One of the best forms of security that one can have is owning a house. Now you've seen, for example, working with PCN, with Father Kevin Barr's group, we now have some of the squatter areas being developed with proper housing. And as some of you may also know, that we have now changed the laws. The laws have been changed to allow strata titling in state land and also Itauke land. In other words, what it simply means is before, if you had a block of flats and you wanted to sell the block of flats and for people to own those flats individually, you could only do that with freehold land. Now you can also do that on state land and also Itauke land. What it means, a couple of things it means, is that the value of the Itauke land goes up because you'll find more developers and landowners themselves can actually go and put up flats and sell it, and people will buy it, and they can subsequently use that as collateral, and the banks will let you lend you money for that. So to go and build an individual house can cost you about $150,000 or $80,000, but you may be able to buy a flat as a strata title for $40,000, $50,000, or even less if the economics is right. So that's what's happened. So we've opened up the market for housing. But as anybody will tell you, the housing issue, there's not only one solution. You have institutions like the Public Rental Board that gives access to people to actually a roof over their heads and their families, which means that they can go and actually rent those properties at a very, very affordable price. We need to then graduate them onto owning a house, owning a property, and they can own a property either as a strata title or as a home itself. Now, what we have done now, this year, we've partnered with the mainstream financial institutions, and recently we have now included Housing Authority onto that too. So mainstream financial institutions become part of the whole approach to giving people the opportunity to own their own homes. And we are now giving $10,000 grant to first home buyers. In other words, we're providing equity as part of the contribution for them to be able to go and borrow money from mainstream financial institutions, including Housing Authority. Or if they buy a house, and that's for building a house, $10,000. If they buy a house, then we give $5,000. Why the difference? Is because if they build a house, it spurs on the economy. Because if they build a house, you create economic activity. When you buy a house, you create less of an economic opportunity or less economic activity. So this is the reason why we're encouraging people to build homes. Now, as we've discussed, that Housing Authority has also been given assistance by way of giving more financial funding or accessibility funding to them. We've continuously supported them. We have also, as you know, allocated a number of $1 million to write off debts because of the many inconsistencies in the manner in which Housing Authority were conducting their books as far as the credit books were concerned. So we've written off the loans of many people who had sometimes paid 3 or 4 times more. About 2 weeks ago, the chairman of TLTB, who's also the Prime Minister, and Ministry of Housing signed a MOU where we have now identified 4 squatter areas, and those squatter areas were lands that fall under TLTB. And we have now negotiated with them, and they will be giving us development lease, so we can then develop the squatter areas to give proper title to those squatters who live there. If they get proper title and they're able to get a 99-year lease, they obviously then can go to FNPF and withdraw funds to build homes. They'll get proper access to housing, not just housing, but also water and electricity, proper roads, etc. So 4 of these areas have been identified, and we are looking forward in the following year to developing more squatter areas where we have proper real estate development. So these men and women and families, who some of them have been living there for generations, can actually own a block of land, whether it's leased or whether it's freehold, through Tauke Lands Trust Board, or whether it's through the Land Bank, or whether it's also through the Crown Lands or Lands Department. So it's a multi-pronged approach to solving the housing issues that we do have. And we want to obviously partner with as many responsible partners as possible to find long-term solutions. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, that can be done quite well and quite easily if we have a consolidated and a very pivotal point in terms of identifying the problems and also providing solutions to that. So, without saying anything further, we have here today many of the stakeholders who have been involved. I understand there's a company here from New Zealand too that's got on display affordable housing that people can access. And we want to work together with all stakeholders to ensure that all Fijians at the end of the day have accessible to affordable housing, and they can own their own homes. It's not just a question of them owning property or real estate. It also enhances a person's self-worth, a sense of belonging to society, and a sense of knowing that they have a place in society. And that is very, very critical to all human beings, because it helps towards us having a sense of dignity and a sense of self-worth, like I said earlier on. So thank you very much for being here this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that you will be able to go out and talk to as many people as possible about the policies that we put in place.
representative from the Bank of Baroda.
For those of you who may not know how this grant actually works, you may have seen in the papers we've advertised, individuals can actually, any individual can apply for this as long as it's their first home. Either buying the first home or building the first home. And they can go to any of these financial institutions and put in an application. Now if the application is successful, of course the banks will apply the normal criteria in terms of assessing whether the applicant or applicants can make the loan repayments, and if they believe so, then they send the application to the ministry where it's assessed. In fact, once the banks assess them, we really don't have to do that much, and then we give the $10,000 or the $5,000, which is paid directly to the bank, and it goes as a contribution to that individual applicant's loan. So that's how it works. So if you know people who have not, don't have their first home, or have not built their first home, or have not bought their first home, please encourage them to do so and apply. And we hope that the financial institutions will compete amongst themselves. I can see Housing Authority, which is a late runner, is already doing better than the other financial institutions.
Hello, sir. How are you? Good.